please say your name, say your role, and what's your everyday work,
Okay.
in your case in the community services area.
Right. So my name is Graham Watson. I'm a senior audience marketing manager working out of Microsoft Redmond, and my role is I'm responsible for the program called User Group Support Services, which is a program to support the technical user groups around the world with things such as speakers, sponsors, content, that sort of thing.
Okay. So everything related with community groups and,
Yep.
so on.
Yep.
And do those include some way other platforms, let's say Facebook or community groups in relation with Microsoft technologies, or
Not really, not directly at least. We obviously have Facebook pages and we use Twitter and all these other things as communication mechanisms for my particular program, but the actual work for Facebook or through Facebook and so forth, the official strategy is dealt with by other people far more intelligent than myself elsewhere in Microsoft.
Okay.
I'm just user groups.
So your role, because in a way some people could say that do user groups have to be monitored or leaded in a way, and there is something that it manages automatically?
So obviously, so user groups definitely need to have leaders. Now that's a very different thing to where you said monitored, which sounds a bit like Microsoft managing them and so forth. We don't want to manage user groups. What we want to do is support them. But it is very important that every user group has at least one strong leader who's driving that user group and is passionate about it. User groups that don't have anybody who is a driving force tend to wither and die fairly quickly. So that community aspect is very important. But we believe that user groups are user groups. They're by the community, for the community. They're not Microsoft groups. They're groups interested in Microsoft.
Okay. So that's one question but two sides. Let's say, what's actually the importance of user groups for Microsoft, and what's the strategy
Okay.
for Microsoft?
So user groups are important to Microsoft for a number of different reasons. One is that when you think about the sort of people that tend to take part in and attend user groups and so forth, they're effectively self-selecting as those people who are particularly interested and passionate and so forth about technology. And there are always people that we're keen to talk to, either because we want to tell them about the wonderful things that we're doing, or just as importantly, that we want their feedback about the wonderful things that we could be doing and aren't, or the things that we're not doing right or whatever. It's possibly even more important that we have strong relationships with the user groups so that we get their feedback and input and we can have a dialogue with them, than it is that we use them or can use them as a way to get our messaging across. We can do that in a number of different ways, but that interaction and communication is something that user groups to a large extent are fairly unique for.
Okay. So in a way, one of your roles is, let's say, organize requirements by people, and
well, we don't actually really organise requirements and so forth to any great extent. It's more a case of providing an environment where user groups can survive and be successful and so forth. So, for example, we know that one of the things that most user groups would like to be able to do on a regular basis is have a new person come along and speak to them. Somebody, because if you have the same people speaking all the time, then you get the same opinions all the time, and that sort of thing. So having the ability to get somebody from somewhere else to come and talk to your user group is a good thing. But frequently that costs money. Even if it's just a case of having to pay for travel and expenses and so forth, it costs money. So one of the things that we provide through User Group Support Services, which is the program that I run, is we provide a small amount of funding occasionally to a user group so that they can get a good speaker from somewhere else in the country or locally or wherever to come along and talk to their user group. We also provide, as I said earlier, some content, and we provide an ability to get the user groups better known and published and so forth, that sort of thing. So it's really anything that we can do to help a user group be successful is something that we're keen to do.
Okay. Is there are there any areas of special interest in user groups? Let's say user groups are related under the Microsoft point of view. Are related to development areas or
Well,
IT, or are there two big areas, or how does it work?
So, to some extent, we obviously have a particular interest in our current and upcoming technologies. We want to support user groups that are interested in our current technologies because they're the people that are actually using and deploying the current products that we have in use. We want to support those groups that are interested particularly in our upcoming technologies because they again can help us with the direction and so forth of the products as we develop them and that sort of thing. But the other thing is remembering again what the main thing that we're doing this for is so that we have this communication channel, this dialogue. We're actually also interested in groups that are not necessarily currently that interested in Microsoft technologies anyway. For instance, only last month we provided some funding to an Apple user group in California so that they could get somebody to come to their meeting. Now, you might think, why on earth would Microsoft support an Apple user group? Reason's quite simple. Firstly, these are technologists, these are people interested in technology, and we like talking to people who aren't absolutely convinced that Microsoft is the right approach. It's great to be able to have a dialogue with those people as well, understand why they like whatever it is they're interested in, like for example the Macintosh or whatever, understand what where the Macintosh has its strengths as opposed to Microsoft, understand where we can improve and so forth, and to have that dialogue and make sure that they understand what we're about. It may not be what's right for them, possibly, but as long as they know what we can provide, then we're much further on than if they just think that Microsoft's the big bad wolf.
Okay, we are talking about social networks.
Okay.
So, and it seems, or there is some kind of perception, especially for mainly older people, that stuff about social networks is a young stuff. I mean, it's just a young stuff. Is there any way in which Microsoft analyzes all this information and maybe establishes different groups of interest depending on age and things like that, or not?
Microsoft has buildings full of marketing people who spend large amounts of time looking at all of our customers and potential customers and dropping them into different groups and so forth. At the end of the day, though, that's just a tool for us to use to better understand our audience and what sort of things they want to hear and that sort of thing. As far as social media in general is concerned, and as far as different age groups, I think the key difference is that the younger people have become more, it's more of a habit with these people on the whole than it is with older people. Older people maybe are more familiar with email, and you tend to use the stuff that's simplest and easiest for you. And that's one of the challenges, of course, that Microsoft has, in fact any company really has, is understanding all the different ways of communication that different customers have. You need to be able to talk to them via the method they want to talk. You can't say, okay, well, we are going to base our entire marketing strategy on Twitter, for example. Twitter's a really good way of doing certain things, but you can't do everything in one method, so you have to deal with all these different things.
Right. And is maybe the topic to be covered the other big clue, the key?
It can be to some extent, but again, for some technologies, they cover a broad spectrum. For some technologies, you're right, it's very... there's a specific group of people that will be interested in that technology, and in a few cases, there's a specific communication mechanism, Twitter, Facebook, email, large banner ads outside train stations, whatever it happens to be. In some cases, there's a specific mechanism which fits the specific group of people we're trying to talk to. But it's not that common. There's, for products which are more young people type products, then maybe the social media type of things, as people know them nowadays, are the more effective ones. But for most technologies, it's all over the place. That's the thing. You can't treat everybody exactly the same.
I would like to add some message for companies as well. We always do it, no matter what we deal about in interviews. And in some cases, I've read then some advertisements, some advices, better, saying, hey, people in the company, people who takes care of your connections outside, pay attention to community services in general,
Yes.
and to what you do with this,
Yep.
because it's going to be important, at the end of the year. Under your point of view, in which ways those community services for companies could be important? Even talking about the return of investment.
Sure. I think to a small extent, I'm thinking very broadly now as far as businesses are concerned. To some extent, it depends upon the type of business you are and that sort of thing. For example, I wouldn't, and I don't know anything about them, which is why I chose them, I wouldn't think that British Steel, for example, in fact I don't even know if they still exist, but I wouldn't see British Steel as being able to get incredibly large amounts out of mass market social media campaigns trying to tweet or whatever to the younger crowd. It's not their target audience. But for any business that has a general consumer type of customer, then they need to consider all those different places where their consumers go to. So the first step perhaps is know your customer. Once you know your customer, you can then work out, so where does your customer hang out, effectively. Once you know where they hang out, you can then start thinking about, so how do you get to hang out in the same places? You can't, again, if you want to meet fishermen, okay, it's no good throwing a party in the centre of a place which is nowhere near the sea. Go to where your customers are.
And one of the areas that they said that might be useful, let's say you mentioned Twitter, is about control of presence.
Okay.
Does it make sense?
Controlled presence. Absolutely. Well, again, it depends upon the image you want to put across. There are companies in the IT space who have a very controlled presence, and they've decided that the only people that are allowed to talk on their behalf are specific individuals and so forth, and they have strict policies against individuals within the organisation doing anything in the social media space. There are other companies, Microsoft's an example, where we have a very simple guideline as far as social media is concerned, and individuals within Microsoft taking part in social media. It's simple. It's do the right thing. Say whatever you think is the right thing. Don't talk about things that we haven't announced. Don't say anything which you would be embarrassed if your manager found out about. In fact, expect that assume your manager is looking over your shoulder. As long as you take those two things into account, don't talk about things which we haven't announced, and assume your manager is looking over your shoulder. They're really, I mean, it's different than that, but they're really the guidelines for most Microsoft people is get involved.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's very important that we are seen as approachable, that if somebody wants to talk to Microsoft, it's possible. And actually, I'd say it's not just that it's important that we are seen as, it's actually important that we are seen as, that we are approachable and that we do have these dialogues.
Okay. And, well, it's inevitable to talk about the future. And to talk about, I asked you before about the strategy, I guess you have some degree of freedom at the time of deciding what to do in relation with community services.
Right.
And I guess that degree ends when your directions are to be taken. Are those directions in the way of let's make community services grow and grow and grow, like it seems all over with other general
to a large extent,
services?
For user group support services, the key things really are, firstly, that we want to have that dialogue with as many people as possible. Okay. Now, obviously, it's second-hand and third-hand through user groups, being member of user groups, and user groups in turn being members of user group associations and that sort of thing. But the more we can extend that dialogue, the better. To some extent, we really don't mind where that dialogue takes place. If it's, for example, a Microsoft evangelist turning up at an actual user group meeting, excellent, because there's nothing to beat face-to-face interaction. On the other hand, we fully also recognise that most user groups nowadays are not just purely physical groups of people who get together. They also have websites and virtual presences and all this sort of thing. Many user groups actually are purely virtual. So we also want to have interactions at that level as well. Basically, very simple. We just want to talk to people, and we will talk to them wherever we can. That's it. That's the strategy. It's a very simple strategy, but talk to people.
Right. Yeah, I can tell you it is that way. In Spain, there are a lot of user groups in relation with development, which is my area, and in Madrid, and also there are some special user groups that are just virtual.
Right.
I mean, I've collaborated with them with webcasts, talking about, let's say, C# against VB.NET or Silverlight, promises and whatever. So, well, let's finish the future.
Sure.
What do you think? What's going to be the future?
The future
of this community service?
Of community services.
Or what would you say, or what would you advise to the community user groups, let's say in Spain, since the readers are going to be mainly in Spain or Latin American areas, what would you advise to them as a strategy to follow?
Okay. So I would think, well, firstly, I'll paint what I see as what I would like to see as the future for the user group community all up, as far as Microsoft's concerned. And it's very simple. It's that there are thriving user groups on any topic that is of current interest to the community all around the world, where they have good communication amongst themselves, good communication with Microsoft, that they have a honest belief, which is proven by what's actually happening, that they can stand up and talk to us about absolutely anything whatsoever, whether it's positive or negative, and that when they have issues, they come talk to us, and when we can help them, we can. But at the end of the day, it's definitely their user group. It's not seen as that this is a Microsoft user group which Microsoft is running and the users are coming to. It's theirs.
Right, it's the technology that is being discussed. In this
Absolutely.
group, so.
But they're not our user groups, they're their user groups, and that's something I think that's particularly important. As far as the user group leaders themselves are concerned, and suggestions and recommendations as to what to do in order to make sure that they have strong and thriving user groups, I think there's a number of things. Most of them, are, in all honesty, I think are extremely obvious. Thing number one is you need to advertise. Now, by advertise, what I'm really talking about is everything from just getting your message out there, doing things like registering your user group with the INETA association, with user group support services, having regular events and so forth which are advertised, that sort of thing. Perhaps also maybe doing occasional things in your local community. I know of a number of user groups that have done things like they've reached out to local schools or the name's gone, charitable organisations and help them and that sort of thing. And I think that sort of outreach as well is very good, because it shows that these user groups care about more than just getting hold of the latest shiny thing, whatever that happens to be. So that sort of advertising, making sure you're known, is very important. I think the other thing that's very important, or one of the many other things that's very important, is to make sure not only that you have a group of people within your user group that are dedicated, interested in really driving the community, but also, and this is something that was brought home to me yesterday when I was talking to a user group leader, also make sure that if for any reason any of those individuals ends up leaving, that there's somebody waiting to step into their place. Because there's nothing more frustrating than seeing an extremely active, thriving user group which is totally dependent upon this one person, an individual who's really driving the community. And then that person changes their job or whatever and moves somewhere else, and all of a sudden we have this group of people who is now leaderless, and within a few months either one or two things will happen. Somebody will step up to replace them out of sheer good luck, or the user group will just fold and die because they've lost that driving force. So I think that's also critically important. And then the other thing I think is also, well, actually, a couple of things. One is, don't treat your user group as a totally isolated group of people. Think about other groups that are doing similar things, reach out to them, form those relationships between these different groups, because you can learn a lot from other people doing the same sort of thing. And then finally, if you're a physical group who gets together and has regular meetings, don't forget the virtual space. Don't forget Facebook, Twitter, and so forth. Don't forget things like maybe if you have your meetings, record them. Make them available for the people that couldn't turn up, that sort of thing. And the other way around, if you're purely a virtual group, think about how you can form some sort of a physical presence, even if it's something along the lines of reaching out to other user groups who have a physical presence and forming a relationship with them, that sort of thing.
Well, let's finish with just one question. Something that I could call social fiction, let's say, which is nobody maybe thought about 5 years ago about the importance that actually has something like Facebook or Twitter.
Yep.
Okay. So let's make some social fiction in community services.
Okay. All right.
And see what do you think is going to be the next big thing in this area that we will be talking in 10 years now?
Trust me, if I knew that, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you right now. I'd be sitting in Bill Gates' house. Let's think. Next big thing in the next 10 years. I think that and this is purely me, this is not my, I'm just thinking off the top of my head.
Social fiction.
Absolutely. I think that the division between the different platforms, Twitter, Facebook, all these different platforms will have to do one of two things. It'll either have to disappear in a way that you can interact with the social space entirely, or it'll have to disappear in a way that at least these tools are much better connected. The problem is that at the moment we have so many different tools out there for social media type things, and you can't be part of the social media space as a whole. You are part of these, well, in the case of Facebook, these massive, but of these different islands and so forth. And unless we can get to the point where the islands all talk to each other and so forth, it's always going to be fragmented, and you're always going to have all sorts of problems. Okay. So that's...
Well, let's see if it happens.
I hope. I'm not convinced, but I hope.
Okay. I always finish my interviews asking if the interviewee has been to Spain.
I have.
You know.
I have indeed. I love it. In fact, I've been to Barcelona a number of times, in particular because of the tech ed, and I used to love going there. It's a lovely, beautiful place.
Okay. Are you going back?
I can only hope. I used to live in the UK, and of course Spain was quite an easy
journey. That's what I thought because of your accent.
Absolutely. But now that I live in the States, of course, it's a heck of a long way. And the biggest issue is with my family still living in the UK. Whenever I come to Europe, then that's where I end up wanting to go so I can make my personal family connections and so forth. Going to Spain is something I like to do, but I can only ever really do on business or that sort of thing because otherwise my parents get upset.
Well, if it happens to you to stop by Madrid and people will make it so very good, just tell them, remind them about this interview.
Absolutely.
So maybe we can talk again.
Sounds good. Okay, cool.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
For your time.
You're welcome.
I hope these opinions are, let's say, some examples followed for those user groups in Spain.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.